All right, well, looks like it is now at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, which is when the webinar is scheduled to begin. So with that being said, I want to be respectful of everybody's time who joined today. I really can't thank you enough for hopping on and, giving me some time out of your day to hopefully give you a really well-rounded introduction to Priority Matrix. And, when you leave this webinar, I hope that you can, feel confident that you understand the system, not necessarily inside and out, but you can at least kind of start to grasp the idea behind it and, our goals for supporting you and your organization. So I'll turn on my camera for just a minute. I want to introduce myself. My name is Erica. I've been with Priority Matrix for just about 5 years, which is, it's crazy to say that time has really flown by. But again, I'm honored to be here with all of you today, and I look forward to walking you through the system and hopefully giving you an idea of how we can help you. So I'm going to actually keep my camera turned off for the duration of the webinar today, just to make sure that we can keep a really good connection. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. I want you all to know that, so I have Pablo and Hai here with me today, assisting for questions that may come in through the chat. So feel free to, if you have any technical problems on your side or have questions you want addressed, definitely drop those in the chat there. They can answer those for you. But I also want you to know that at the very end of this meeting, we're going to have tons of time to answer those questions. I'll actually go ahead and unmute you for that section, or we can kind of talk and get down to those questions. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we will get to it. So first and foremost, again, thank you so much for joining me today. This is going to be an introduction to Priority Matrix. I wanted to give you all a quick look at what today's agenda is going to look like, just to kind of give you an idea of what to expect for the next 20 or 30 minutes or so. First of all, I'm going to help you understand what exactly is Priority Matrix. And with that, I'm also going to help you understand who is Priority Matrix currently supporting, what types of companies, what types of verticals do we work with, and who specifically in the organization can really get the most out of Priority Matrix. I want you to definitely understand how you can actually get started. And what I mean by that is where you can install the application, what a test period can look like for you and your team, really getting in there and seeing the value that will provide for you and your team. I'm going to make sure you understand how you can actually get started. After all that, I'm actually going to break into a live demo where we can take a look at the application, walk through it kind of from start to finish, make sure you get a lay of the land of it. And then last but definitely not least, like I said, I'm going to save some time for a Q&A to make sure we can get all of your questions answered today. So what exactly is Priority Matrix and why do I need it? With that being said, Priority Matrix can really fall under a lot of different categories, but to kind of sum it up, I've always explained it as a project and task management solution. With that being said, in my opinion, and I think Pablo and I can definitely agree with this, but it definitely doesn't stop there. What Priority Matrix can do for you is, first and foremost, hopefully it will help your organization align priorities. I'm going to dive into that a little bit more into the webinar, but just kind of keep that in mind. A big goal is to help you keep your priorities aligned. Priority Matrix also supports email management. We have a deep-rooted integration with Outlook, which we'll take a look at a little bit later on in this webinar, but that's definitely something that's very unique and special to Priority Matrix. Last but definitely not least, we have a couple specific features that are going to be available to help you and your team actually have shorter and more effective meetings. And I know for a lot of you on this call, the bottom two, improved email management and shorter meetings, are, you might be saying, hoorah, I hope that can definitely help me with that. And, I sure hope it can help you as well. Let's see. So next up, I just kind of wanted to give you a quick introduction to, who does Priority Matrix support? That's one of the most common questions that I get when I do one-on-one demos. And to be honest, we support organizations across all different verticals. Priority Matrix is such a flexible project management solution that we can support construction, biotech, manufacturing, transportation, specialty industries, medical, and so much more. Again, it's not limited to that. Those are just a couple examples of who we've seen be super successful with the system. Within those organizations, we have owners, executives, managers, and individual contributors who all get something a little bit different from Priority Matrix. But again, it is such a flexible and full-featured project management solution. It can really support everybody in their own way to support their needs. So how can I actually get started with Priority Matrix? Priority Matrix is a multi-platform application that is actually going to sync it across platforms, no matter how many places you have it installed. So be sure to install Priority Matrix for your Mac and Windows desktop application. We also do have integrations with Office 365, such as Teams and Outlook, which I will definitely touch on more into this webinar. We have a mobile application, and we also have a web app. They're all going to be fairly similar for the most part. And again, they're going to sync automatically. So if I were to give you one piece of advice right now, I would say definitely get it installed for your Office applications and also on mobile, because that's going to be super helpful to help you work really no matter where you are. The last thing I'm going to show you in this presentation before we actually get into the live demo is a couple of goals that we have for you when you start using Priority Matrix. And when I was putting this presentation together, I kind of thought to myself, what are some of the most common things that I hear people telling me pretty much every single day what they're hoping to get out of Priority Matrix? And the first thing would be is we really want to be able to create one central location for all team collaboration. Something that Pablo said to me a little bit ago, which really stuck with me, was, nothing kills productivity more than context switching, and I can't relate to that anymore. So by being able to keep everything in just one central place, we want to help you increase your productivity. That's going to be one of the second goals that we have for you. It's pretty self-explanatory. Again, we'll dive into that and take a closer look at it. And then lastly, one of the more common things that we've been seeing come up is people are looking to automate their processes, whether that looks like email automation to you or setting up an automated ticketing system. There's a lot of different processes out there, and we want to help you be effective. In order to use your time efficiently, setting up automated processes can really be a wise move for most organizations. Again, we can take a closer look at that together. All right, so now we're ready for the live demo that I prepared for you. So what I did here is I just opened up my Microsoft Teams application. As I mentioned, Priority Matrix can be used across a lot of different platforms. You're not limited to just using it in Microsoft Teams, but if you are Teams users, we find that people are super successful when they just add it on to Microsoft Teams. For the duration of the demo today, I'm actually going to stick to this platform, but keep in mind, if Teams isn't for you, maybe you haven't adopted it yet, you can actually see the Priority Matrix desktop app in my toolbar. That's a great place to get started. For me, I really like the web application, which will have the exact same layout as what we're looking at today. So taking a look at kind of the lay of the land here, the idea that we've created with Priority Matrix, and you all are probably going to get super sick of me saying this, but we really want to harp on the idea of creating that one central location for you and your teammates and potentially the rest of your organization to work together. In order to create that kind of base layer of organization and structure, Priority Matrix utilizes projects. And the way that I kind of explain the projects to people when I connect to them one-on-one is representing the major topics or even ideas of things that you and your teammates are working on and tracking together. Talking about projects, something I always like to highlight is while Priority Matrix is very strong as a team collaboration tool, we also do our best to support your privacy. What I mean by that is when you create a new project, basically when you go to add project and you create something new here, let's say you have 100 people on your license, even 10 people, even 5 people. They are not going to be automatically seeing your projects until you intentionally share it with them. So you're basically just keep in mind you're able to keep projects just for yourself. And when you're ready and you want your teammates to see those, you can definitely do that. That's a big question that typically comes up in terms of privacy. So I wanted to make sure that I kind of address that for you all right off the bat. All right, so kind of getting in here, again, this is going to be where you spend a lot of your time, kind of in the main project view. Again, kind of categorizing and organizing the major things that you're working on with your teammates and with your organization. I'm going to go ahead and open up a project here where we can kind of start to look at the basic foundation of what priority matrix is. Within each and every project, you're going to have these 4 quadrants. And you might be thinking, well, what's so great about the 4 quadrants? What is that going to do for me? I've heard tons and tons of feedback of people saying it's really just not effective for us anymore to have a giant list of 100 things that we need to get done, whether that's written in a Word document or a piece of paper. What we've done here with Priority Matrix is we like to emphasize the 4 quadrants. So at a really quick glance, you can understand, all right, quadrant 1, this would be hypothetically our biggest priorities as a team, things that we need to focus on right away. With that being said, you've probably noticed that this project here, I have it listed as like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then postponed. This is a really specific example for an organization who is working on a website redesign. I want you all to know that you can actually rename these quadrants to be specific for your project. As I touched on at the start of this webinar, we have all types of organizations using Priority Matrix, and so, naturally their projects are going to look pretty different. And people really like to customize these quadrants. I'll show you a quick example down there in quadrant 4. I like to change it to emails and notes because I think it's really important to have a place just to kind of dump those emails and ideas into so you can get everything into one place. Diving into looking at the action items here. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll open up this task. Within every single action item in Priority Matrix, this is where your item details are going to be placed. And in my opinion, if you get one big takeaway from the webinar, this would definitely be one of them, which is really anything under the sun that you can think of for team collaboration, you're going to be able to fill out within these item details. First and foremost, I always suggest just simply setting a due date. If that's all you have time to do within your priority matrix, as long as you get your due date added on there, Priority Matrix is going to remind you, hey, you forgot about this task. It's time to follow up with this email. Just get that due date set. So you can manually go in there and you can set a deadline, and you also have the option for a start date. That's not as commonly as used, but if you're trying to have a duration of a task, you can definitely add that in there. Next up, keeping in mind that if this project was shared with, let's say, 10 people, whenever I make a status update, such as updating the progress here, everybody in this project will be able to see that update. They can also see when I plan to have this task finished by, and if I have any item notes. People like to think of these as subtasks, and you can actually go through and you can check them off when it's completed. With all that being said, one of the biggest features for team collaboration is going to be the fact that you can actually delegate a task to somebody. So if I look at this and I feel like, hey, it's not actually my responsibility to get this done anymore, it's just as simple as handing it off, or in other words, delegating it to somebody on your team. If there's multiple people working on this item together, I always like people to understand that you can definitely get them involved. What I mean by that is technically we call it adding followers. So if I create a task, and in this example, I know for sure Pablo and Hai need to know whenever I make a status update, I would definitely add them as followers immediately. And now what happens is whenever I add a comment allowing you to chat with your teammates, I update the progress, any type of status change that happens here, the owner, the followers are all going to be notified because of those changes. You guys might be wondering, what do the notifications look like? And I promise I'll circle back to that because I know it's definitely an important thing to understand. A few other things I just want to point out super quickly. Within each item, you have the option to add files. You can also link to external resources. A really common link I see people doing recently is to Salesforce. Kind of linking this with that CRM is really popular, or a ticketing system. And you can also link it to other items either in this project or in a different project entirely, just to kind of keep things organized and tied together really nicely. As you can see, there are other things going on here, but for the sake of time and for the sake of trying not to bore you to death, I'm going to probably just stick to those kind of key functionality, key features there. In terms of communication and having this central place to work together, we think it's really important that people are aware of the chat functionality. I put a quick comment in there. I said, hey, Bella, we here at Priority Matrix, we use the chat 100%. I can't remember the last time I got an email from one of my teammates, and I couldn't be happier to say that, because I see people every single day with inboxes that are just absolutely flooded. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate that it really makes it feel impossible to find what you're looking for and keep track of action items. So if you're able to utilize the Priority Matrix chat and keep your conversations on an item specific level, it's going to make it so much easier to stay organized and also see and share updates from your teammates. Because keeping in mind, the idea of this is to share these projects with your teammates so everybody can kind of see what's going on and, really stay on the same page no matter where you're at. A couple other things I want to point out before we move on here is in the top right corner, you'll notice a couple different views. So jumping to the list view, this is very commonly used by managers. And the reason being is because you'll notice that I filtered by due dates right away. That's just kind of how my brain works. I like to see things with the upcoming due dates listed. And what's really nice is you can also see who's responsible for it. So for example, if I were to look at this task here that we can see is due November 22nd, so next week, we can also see that it's 60% of the way done. So it's probably not a huge red flag at this point, but if it were, for example, the progress was down to 0, as a manager, you may be a little bit concerned. Then what you could say is, hey, can we talk about this during our next meeting? Send that comment, and then you may even say, remind everybody in 1 hour, just to really be sure that this item is brought back to the top and everybody notices it. Next up, we have kind of your standard calendar, which, yes, you can definitely sync this with your Outlook calendar and your Google Calendar as well. A lot of people like to do that. And for you project managers who are on the webinar today, definitely kind of tune in here. We recently added dependencies to Priority Matrix, which, as you all know, is super important for project planning to make sure, the timeline is accurate. You're going to be able to get everything done kind of as planned, and there's no unexpected barriers that come up. So again, this is our project level Gantt chart. You can set all types of relationships within this project, and it's super helpful for kind of high level project planning. Last but definitely not least is going to be the news feed here. I love to click on the news feed if I've been out of town or if I know that there have been a lot of changes happening, because essentially what you can do is just kind of scroll through and it's going to show you that very high level of all the changes happening across this project. If you're looking for something a little bit more global and you'd like to keep an eye on all of your projects at the same time, we also have a global feed. So again, it would take all of those projects and show you the overviews. And we also have that global calendar if you wanted to see how everything is kind of overlapping with each other. So hopefully you guys are kind of still with me. What I want to do now is, I know that a couple common questions that typically come up at this point, and I'm going to address those for you to hopefully kind of, answer those if they might be in your mind right now. So at this point, people typically, understand how to set up the projects, the idea of working on it with your team. But the next question I usually get is, okay, this all looks great, but when it comes to notifications, where are those going to be? And what does that look like? Because that's a huge factor for a lot of people who start using priority matrix, which is when these notifications come through, how do I see them, and why are they going to be able to help me? So there's a couple different places you can actually receive your notifications. The first one is going to be directly in app. So you'll see that I clicked to the home view and there's a little red 23. That means I essentially have 23 new items that, the system thinks that need my attention basically. So these alerts are going to entail anything that has changed in your priority matrix for items that you're specifically working on, whether it's a status update like we looked at before, a progress update, a new chat, something delegated to you, anything in your priority matrix that basically needs your attention will come to these alerts. And what's nice is that if you're not super clear on why it's showing up here, you can click on it. And on the right-hand side, you're going to have more context. So you can complete items by just simply typing done. This is fully interactive. So if I look at this and, all of a sudden I have a question for a teammate about it, we can delegate it. We can update the due date here. It's again a totally interactive list of alerts. And if you're like, okay, I don't really need to see these anymore, you can actually clear notifications with two different options here. In terms of notifications, some people also like to have emails come through whenever there's a change. That's definitely going to be an option for you. We have a couple different preferences you can choose from for the email notifications. And then I would say one of the most popular ways that people actually like to stay in the loop with their priority matrix is by setting up notifications to come to their Microsoft Teams channels by using what's called connectors. So if you're not familiar with that, a quick, 10-second explanation here is you can basically pinpoint the most important projects for each channel you're in and decide what type of notifications you need to be posted there. So for people who spend a lot of their time working in channels and they don't want to miss notifications coming through priority matrix, that's going to be definitely something that we'll want to explore together to get it up and running for you. Next up, a really common question I have is, okay, this is all great, but let's say it's Monday morning, with daylight savings, we're probably all a little bit more tired than normal in the morning, and you're really hoping that Priority Matrix can just give you that automatically created agenda so you can kind of just get going without having to think a whole lot. The agenda view in your Priority Matrix is going to be just that for you. What we're looking at here is basically a breakdown of the next 7 days and all of your overdue items of everything across all of your projects that are your responsibility that, basically have a due date here for you. So for today, for example, here's actually an email that I integrated and set a due date for it. I have a task here, and then this is actually the webinar that we're in today. So it's not only showing me what's in Priority Matrix, it's also going to say, hey, here's all the meetings on your calendar. So you can kind of start to mentally prepare for all of these things that you have to get done. And what's nice is it's actually showing you into the future as well. So you can continue to be prepared for that. So again, this would be on kind of that personal task management level, right? Helping you really get on track and make sure you're not overlooking anything. For managers, it's also very critical to be able to see, not only what you need to get done, but also where are your teammates at for all those things that you've delegated, or maybe just things you're keeping an eye on. So where I'm at now is I've actually jumped to what we call the search view. And when I show people this view in the one-on-one meetings, I honestly see a grin come across their face. They kind of light up because what you're able to do here is not only are you limited to just searching through priority matrix for items, but at the bottom, you'll also see it says Office 365. What happens here is you're seeing shared files through Teams, your calendar events, and actually every single one of your emails. So what's so great about this is if you type in a keyword, we'll just say review, because I think I have a couple of options for that. It's going to show you everything relevant in your priority matrix and also everything relevant in your Office 365 data. So again, I'll say it again, nothing kills your productivity more than switching context. And by being able to stay in Microsoft Teams and find this information, hopefully it can kind of help you stay on track and cut out all those distractions. One more filter that I really like to point out to people is you can also change the type of item you're seeing. So again, as a manager, if I wanted to see what is everything that Bella in this case is working on, and where is she at with all those upcoming deadlines, now I'm seeing literally all of her action items across priority matrix with the due dates. Hopefully there's status updates that she shared with me. And again, if at any time I have a question, it's really easy just to click on that, ask my question, and then kind of wait for her response. So I always like to make sure people know to clear their filters after they apply them, just so they're not startled when they look at their priority matrix and it may look like everything is missing, but most likely there's just a little filter applied. So there's just one or two more things that I want to mention before I actually open up the floor for the Q&A session. So there were two other things that I mentioned at the very start of this webinar. One of them being the fact that we actually help people prepare to have shorter and more effective meetings. So a lot of the times when I'm on meetings, people will actually ask, why is Priority Matrix different than, the 1 million other project management solutions out there? And immediately, I always think of the OneonOne View because it truly is very unique to Priority Matrix. And the idea here is imagine you're hopping into a meeting with a teammate or a direct report, and typically, we see people scrambling, trying to backtrack through their emails, meeting notes, phone calls, trying to get that meeting agenda prepared. But what this system is going to do for you is it's going to go across all of your projects that yourself and this other person are both involved in. You'll see a list of your teammates here where you can choose from, who you're in this meeting with. And basically what happens is the system prepares this list of all of your shared priorities. So what I mean by that is anything that yourself and this other person are both involved in, it's going to show it right here. And in my opinion, most importantly from this OneonOne View is you can actually add a shared task. So we'll just say new meeting for, let's say holiday review. And we'll say it's going to be due Friday at 8 a.m. You'll see that automatically it's shared between the two of us, and I can change who the owner is. I can pick the project that it will be prioritized into. I can even add item notes. And when I hit add, it's really neat. You're going to see that this is actually added to our shared priority list. And since I put due Friday at 8 a.m., system actually picked that up and it programmed that in for me. So all of those things that you're discussing during meetings that honestly can kind of slip through the cracks unless you are tracking them in a system like this, hopefully that's no longer going to happen because it's just so easy to add items kind of on the fly here. So last but definitely not least, and then we'll go ahead and open this up for questions. But at the start of the meeting, I also did mention that we have an email management system. So not only are you actually able to see your emails and prioritize them directly through the OneonOne View, or if you remember the search view where you also see your emails, you can actually click on it and you can create an action item, prioritize it directly from this view. But for those of you who are thinking, well, honestly, I spend a lot of time in Outlook, you're definitely not alone on that, which is why we've created the Outlook integration. And what this is going to allow you to do is very quickly kind of breeze through your inbox. And whenever you see an email that you feel like, hey, this is super important, I really just can't afford to forget about this email, all you have to do is use the priority matrix integration to basically choose the project where you need to prioritize this into. So we'll put it into the website design one. Again, looking at the quadrants, you can decide, is this something I need to tackle right away? Can it wait? Or if you're like me, you typically just dump your emails into quadrant 4. You can set your due date, and then essentially when you hit create action item, the system's going to give you a little preview of the task you just created. And this is actually a live item. And what I mean by that is you can continue to update the progress. You could even delegate it to somebody if you needed to. And all this will be syncing back to your priority matrix in Teams or whatever platform you choose to use it on. What's great about this is, again, for those of you who feel like you're just not really going to be able to break the habit of spending time in Outlook, that's perfectly fine, because you will be able to stay up to date with your teammates and keep these emails prioritized. For any of you who are actually interested in learning more about this Outlook integration, which, as you can see, there's a whole lot more you can do than just simply create a task or prioritize that email. And also for those of you who are wondering kind of the ins and outs of using it in Teams and some of the more advanced features, next week, I'm actually going to be hosting a webinar specifically talking about how Priority Matrix and Office 365 can work together. So if you guys are interested, I'll send out that webinar link just later today. So with all of that being said, thank you guys for sitting through that and kind of letting me give you that introduction. I think we're ready for the Q&A now. So what we can do, and let's see if I'm able to manage this. I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute. I'll go to the attendee list, and if any of you have questions, I believe the best approach to this would be if you're able to just raise your hand through the Teams meeting, and then I can actually unmute you. So I'll keep an eye out for that. Let's see, I'll look at the chat here. All right, so I'm keeping an eye on the attendee list to see if anybody has questions. These questions can be, let's see. Okay, so I see the one comment saying that you don't have a microphone. That's perfectly fine. Go ahead, and if you want, you can type your comment into the chat here, and then I'll read it out loud, and then I'll answer that for you. Perfect, and then it looks like we have a question from Angie, which we will answer that as well. All right, so while you actually go ahead and type in your question, I'm going to jump over to Angie. I'm coming for you. I'm going to unmute you. Allow mic. Okay, Angie, you should be able to talk now. Let's see. Go ahead and give that a try.
Hi, good morning.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for joining.
I'm great. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. So I'm calling from Utah. I'm in Salt Lake City. We have a really small team at a research center, and we've just been looking for a way. I'm a new administrative assistant for them, just helping them manage. They have a number of grant projects that they're working on and different teams who are spread out across the country. And so it does make it really challenging. We have some team members who aren't quite as adept at integrating and using tools like this. And so we talked about kind of initial small team working on it and using Priority Matrix. But if we have, let's say, a team member, I know this is a really strange question, but as far as like sending out, being able to share some things with people that are not, using the platform, they don't have a seat on our license or on our team. Are there any options for, like, what does it look like if we're able to maybe export or share some of these timelines or things with other members who might be outside of the platform?
Yeah, Angie, thank you so much for asking that. That's such a relevant question. And I hear that question, honestly, almost daily. And so I may actually add that to my presentation for next time because it is so relevant for most people. So let me ask you specifically, do you all use the Microsoft Teams platform right now by chance?
The university, we're part of the University of Utah, and University of Utah is, we have Office 365 for all departments, and then also we're switching from Skype to Teams currently. So there are a lot of members of our group who I think would be open to using Teams, but there may be one that is not. So yeah, any tips with regards to managing that would be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's actually a whole lot of ways that people interact with external collaborators through Priority Matrix. The first one would be if you are using Microsoft Teams and it just so happens that that external collaborator is also in Teams with you, what you can do is, and I'll actually just go here super quickly. What you can do is you can actually add a project tab to either a one-on-one chat you may have with them, or if you have them in a channel, you can also add the project tab there as well. So there's kind of two ways you can think about this. If you want your external collaborator to actually be able to edit these action items and, kind of collaborate and work together with you, in that case, what you can do is you can add the project like I have here. And this is a fully collaborative view. So any changes I make, it's going to sync back to the kind of full version that we were looking at today. And what's great about this is, depending on how many projects and action items that they're going to be working on with you, they will, they'll be able to find a place on your license or, kind of come and go as needed. We're able to work with organizations on, kind of a specialty basis, depending on what that looks like. So this would allow them to actually collaborate with you, work together, and all they need is essentially to get started using it would just be to create an account with us. The second option is a lot of people actually don't really want the collaborators to make changes. They just simply want to be able to say, here's what we're working on. Here's what our timeline looks like. Maybe check it out in the Gantt chart or the list format. And so this would be considered the read-only option. Again, they're not able to actually make changes, but they're able to see all the information you share with them. So this is a great way just to pass on timelines, pass on information to them. So again, this would be very much surrounded around using it through Microsoft Teams. But if in any case, if you're not using Teams or maybe they don't use Teams, the great news is you can actually open up a project. You can say share project in read-only mode. And if I copy this, this is something you can actually email to them and it's going to be live. So basically it's going to continue to update as you make changes in this project. So again, just a great way to kind of share that timeline with them. Those are kind of the two things that come to mind immediately, but one thing I definitely want to highlight is Priority Matrix doesn't limit people to only working within their organization. So for example, I could actually create a project and share it with you, Angie, or share it with somebody in your organization. It's not, limited to just by the domain, unless of course the security team wants it to be that way. But we do actually allow you to collaborate and work with people in other organizations to the level that you want to do it. Hopefully that kind of answers the question.
That's really great. That's really helpful. Now, if I were to be sharing in read only through email, does the recipient have to have a seat on the license, or can they just be reading and watching updates independently?
Yeah, so they can actually be completely independent. They don't need to be linked to your license or anything like that. They basically just need that read-only link that you shared with them.
Awesome. That's super helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for your question. That was probably really relevant to a lot of people here today. Okay, let's see. I'm going to check. Let's see. We'll go back here. Angie, I'm going to mute you again. Thanks for that question. We'll see if there's any other hands raised. I'm going to check the chat very quickly here. Okay, yes, so we will email a link to this recording, absolutely. All right, going back to the participant list, I saw one other question was raised. I think maybe we answered that for you in the chat there. Let's see, keeping an eye out. We do have, plenty of time left on this webinar for any other questions. One thing that I do always like to acknowledge is that a lot of people say, hey, we don't actually have any questions right now, but most likely after we start using the system, questions are going to come up, and that's definitely a fair thing to say. And we do offer pretty extensive onboarding and training for our business and enterprise users. So we'll be right there by your side, helping your team get started and answering those questions that kind of come up on the fly. All right, so I'm going to keep an eye out for any other questions that come up. Feel free to ask those really at any time, because that's what I saved this time for at the end of the webinar for. So I'll keep an eye out for those hands that come up. Like I said, we are going to be putting on a webinar next week, really diving in and showing how people can have the most success using Priority Matrix through Microsoft Teams and with Outlook 365. So I would definitely suggest tuning into that if you have the time. We also do offer more kind of one-on-one trainings and group training. So if you're watching this and you're like, hey, this would be great, I'd love to get, our management, the rest of our team on a call, that's definitely going to be available for you. And I would love to, be there to kind of help you guys get started. So with all of that being said, I think we'll be able to wrap up the webinar today, give you 20 minutes back from the meeting time that we initially scheduled. So, definitely go get a cup of coffee, take a walk around the block before your next meeting starts. Again, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate you joining. I believe you'll be followed up with a survey, just kind of asking how I did today. I would love to hear your feedback and, your honest opinion on how everything went, what your thoughts on it are. And yeah, so that's going to be it for today. We will send you the webinar recording, I believe probably later this afternoon or tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that and feel free to forward it on to anybody else in your organization who you think it might be helpful for you. I'm going to go ahead and close out the webinar. Again, thank you all for your time today, and I hope to see you come in for more of a one-on-one or a team training session. Thanks again. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much.